purpose of the whole recruitment process is to really just make sure that we're future-proof ISAR as a team, to make sure we've got the best people on the team.
They need to be selfless, disciplined, able to contribute to a team and stay safe themselves.
Key skill set for me, that enthusiasm, that drive to want to help people, that the patience, the emotional intelligence to deal with the situations that we're presented with.
The weather's a big help. It helps to fatigue the candidates, it helps to focus the candidates, it helps them to look after themselves and accelerate them into that period where they need to be very aware of maintaining their own personal discipline and admin before they become an issue.
Perhaps turning up to a village where everybody is dead and the locals absolutely dejected and you've turned up late.
It's that selflessness and desire to help what needs to come through.
Mental resilience for ISAR is massive, to be fair. It's very easy to be affected by what you see.
Be aware of their environment they're working in and ultimately arrive as a unit.
What we're looking for is people with the right stuff, the good egg we call it, so that's what we're kind of measuring.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, pronouns of your choosing, welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Today we are touching base with our brothers and sisters in UK Fire and Rescue Service's International Search and Rescue Team. You'll remember back in episode 115 we spoke with Danny, Tracy and Joe about their recent trip to the Greece wildfires. They of course did this as part of the UK Fire and Rescue Service, but they are also members of International Search and Rescue. Now, every once in a while, an opportunity comes up for new members to join International Search and Rescue, and last year we ran a recruitment process that was facilitated by our lead directing staff, Martin Foran. I was lucky enough to go along as one of the directing staff, and of course I took some audio equipment with me. Now today you're going to get a bit of an inside listen on how that process is put together. How are we testing the skill sets? What sort of characters do we need to be in UK International Search and Rescue? We're also going to be speaking with Ross Strotho, who is one of the lead directing staff and has been doing this process for many years. So he really has got his finger on the pulse of what it takes to pass this course. Before we jump in there with Martin and Ross, just want to say a big thanks to our partner of the podcast, William Wood Watches, being along for the journey and bringing this episode to you today. William Wood Watches are the creators of those beautifully crafted British luxury watches made from upcycled firefighting equipment. If you head over to their website, William Wood Watches, you'll be able to see their Chivalrous, Valiant and their Triumph collection. I've had my William Wood watch for going on 3 years now, and I get no end of comments on the red watch strap. Now these upcycled straps are just one of the unique pieces about the watch. For example, my red strap comes from the London Fire Brigade red hose. You've got the Tynan Weir hose that makes up the blue strap. Our British Armed Forces bring us the green fire hose. We've got the West Mids yellow fire hose and the William Wood Watches Elite Fire Kit 1. Personally, I think my absolute favourite is the Triumph collection, where they've got the heat, the oxygen and the fuel, the whole 3 points of that fire triangle. There's so much detail that goes into these watches. Despite just being a lover of what William Wood Watches do, I am also incredibly proud to say that last year they donated £40,000, in fact more than £40,000, to firefighting charities. So to get your hands on your beautifully crafted British luxury watch made from upcycled firefighting equipment, head over to williamwoodwatches.com, and if you email the admin team over there and mention the Firefighter Podcast, I'm pretty sure you'll get a little bit of a treat as well. So with all that said and done, let's jump in there with Martin and Ross and hear just what it takes to be part of the UK's International Search and Rescue Team when I went down and joined them in December for their recruitment process.
Yeah, good morning, it's Ross Strother.
Ross, you took part in this year's UK International Search and Rescue recruitment. You were one of the directing staff, right?
Yeah, I am. I've done this a good few times now.
Why do you keep going back? Why do you keep doing it? What do you enjoy about it?
It's just enjoyable being able to assist with the future of UK ISAR and select, help select the candidates and keep them safe throughout the process. Yeah.
What sort of attitudes and behaviours do you see from the best recruits? So the best recruits that come through the course, what are the sort of characteristics you're looking for?
They need to be selfless, disciplined, able to contribute to a team and stay safe themselves, be aware of their environment they're working in and ultimately arrive as a unit rather than individuals.
How challenging do you think it is, that aspect of balance and welfare? Because a lot of firefighters think they can always just call for assistance, call for support, but in UK ISAR, you're deployed in country by yourself. When have you seen that gone well and not gone well in terms of stopping and looking after yourself when you get the opportunity?
Well, it's something you can see throughout the many selection courses we've done where people become focused on themselves and just taking care of their own personal admin and things and less team aware or environment or situational awareness. Whereas that's probably more important, because if you lose one staff member off a team, you're going to reduce the effectiveness of that team.
Yeah.
And we haven't got, as you say, an open book of resources when you're deployed overseas. So yeah, it's a round package.
Without naming any names or any services or anything like that,
Yep.
what were some of the most impressive, if you will, scenarios or the most impressive examples you saw during this year's recruitment?
Well, obviously, this assessment this time has been virtually a real deployment with the storm that's come through.
The weather was pretty brutal this time.
Yeah,
It was
the
almost
weather,
non-stop. It was cold
the
as
weather.
well. We're
Yeah.
early December now for people that are unfamiliar.
Yeah, and I mean, the weather's a big help. It helps to fatigue the candidates. It helps to focus the candidates. It helps them to look after themselves and accelerate them into that period where they need to be very aware of maintaining their own personal discipline and admin before they become an issue. There's many thousands of trees down across the Lake District,
Yes.
especially where we're operating with some of our scenarios. You have to be very aware of hanging trees and tree fall. There's no power. Running on generators, there's no shops available, there's absolutely nothing, so it's almost an in-country deployment.
It's almost a perfect storm.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm. And what you'll find is some candidates, when they're finding casualties on these scenarios, are more than willing to use their own equipment. You know, you're going into a potential scenario where somebody's not had anything for several days, and there's some are willing. Not all, but some are willing to open up their bag and their rucksack, bring out their sleeping bag, their bivvy bag, take care of the casualty, the person that's had the hardest time, and using their equipment, their cookers, their food, because ultimately we can access that. So it's that selflessness and desire to help needs to come through, and you do see it on the selection courses.
Martin Foran.
Martin, so we've just taken part in, we've just ran the UK International Search and Rescue Recruitment in 2021. What's the purpose of the recruitment and how did you find it this year?
I'm in charge of facilitating the exercise over the last 2 or 3 days. The purpose of the whole recruitment process is to really just make sure that we're future-proof ISAR as a team, to make sure we've got the best people on the team, and yeah, just to make sure that we're choosing the right people. It's not about necessarily how technically brilliant anybody is at any particular skill set. So take rope rescue as an example. Doesn't matter if you're a rope rescue expert. What we're looking for is people with the right stuff, the good egg we call it. So that's what we're kind of measuring
the good egg
against.
concept.
Yeah, it's the good egg concept.
You say about different skill set and stuff like that. A lot of people can get bogged down in the complexity, thinking that they need to be all super USAR trained and all this sort of jazz. There's a lot of variations of skill sets that we see, but what are some of the stuff that is sort of entailed in the deployments that you've seen? We've obviously spoken to some of the Greece deployments recently. What skill set do UKFRS actually do, and what places do you guys deploy these skills?
Key skill set for me is really having that enthusiasm, that drive to want to help people. That's the main skill set. The patience, the emotional intelligence to deal with the situations that we're presented with. Like I said, you can teach anybody anything, and that's really the idea around the sort of selection process that we're getting.
You say about the characteristics there. One of the big things I find differs with the UK side, because a lot of people hear those characteristics and go, well, surely they're the same for all people in the emergency services, but you said patience there.
Yeah.
Patience, why is that such a crucial aspect? Because you've tested that in different clever ways over these last sort of 4 days. Why is patience so important?
Yeah, so the classic sort of ISAR phrase is on the bus, off the bus.
Hurry up and wait.
Certainly, hurry up and wait. We've all heard these daft little isms that we've got.
Why do you do that? Is that actually practical? You've been on, how long have you been part of ISAR now?
20 years. Been part of ISAR now.
So you've done a number of deployments. What places have you visited with the team?
Last deployment I had was Haiti, and that was very much hurry up and wait. It took us nearly 2 days to get to the scene of operations there.
Why is that so difficult? People will hear this and think, surely you go in as aid, why can't you just get there and crack on? What are the challenges that you face?
There's an awful lot of cogs that need to turn, from basic things like being released from your shift in service to cogs that are turning behind the scenes in the UK government to organise flights, the logistics of flying people across the world and getting the kit prepared, landing in country, dealing with the paperwork and the logistics again of getting people from an airport in a disaster-stricken country to a scene of operations, down roads where the power lines might be down, the roads are impassable, etc. So a lot of it is getting to a place extremely quickly and then waiting for various authorisations and various bits of paperwork to be sorted out and agreed, and it can be frustrating. You've got to have that mental resilience to deal with that, knowing that the whole reason you've spent a number of years training and exercising and preparing is for this very scenario, and then all of a sudden somebody's stopping you from getting there as quick as you can, and when you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, it is difficult.
You'll have the request often comes through from some sort of government structure, but then when you're in country, I mean, you went to Haiti, there was a great deal of unrest, there'd been a lot of changes happening in and around the infrastructure that people would normally structure their day-to-day life around. How do you guys face those challenges when you get somewhere? You know there's people that need to be helped, but you've got to balance that relationship with emergency services, relationship with the local government, relations with enforcement.
Yeah, I would say most people are absolutely desperate for your assistance when you arrive in numerous ways. I'll give you two examples. So one example might be you walk down a street and families are desperate to find a missing relative under the rubble pile, and can kind of do the hearts and minds thing where you may go into the rubble and actually see their deceased relative, and you've got to give them that sort of closure.
How do you deal with that? Because they're all over. You see the pictures, people scrambling over the rubble piles. And even when you know somebody may not be, because it's whether or not it's a recovery or a rescue exercise, and that's got to be so morally difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. I mean, mental resilience for ISAR is massive, to be fair. It's very easy to be affected by what you see. I think, again, having the right people on the right team and having the right people around you on your team, the team ethic we've got is so strong that I think that does help the support you get from your team, friends, teammates. At the other end of the spectrum will be perhaps turning up to a village where everybody is dead and the locals are sort of absolutely dejected, and you've turned up late, and it's so obvious to tell because the atmosphere is just flat. It's just there's nothing. The atmosphere it's terrible to walk up and down and everybody just be looking at you with such empty looks on the faces. But on the other hand, you know, you get that hope of people running up to you. You know, there's somebody missing.
How do you deal with that? So, you know, like for example, people think you just get on the ground or you're breaking tools or you're cutting tools, and how do you stop yourself? The first building you walk up to and people are screaming at you, you may be briefed to go and assess an entire town or 5 or 6 buildings. How do you, as sort of a team leader, when you're operating in that sector, how do you not get drawn into people pulling you away? You've got to go and do this, you've got to go and do that building. How does that process work?
That's purely down to training, because that is absolutely everybody's mindset is rescue people when we come across them. So certainly as a firefighter, you turn up to an incident, you're there to deal with that incident. Let's go. Let's all guns blazing. Let's help the people that we can see right in front of us. The way that the overseas team works, we've got a limited number of people. We've got to do the best that we can with the limited number of people.
That's a fact. You can't just keep calling for assistance. Most people think of the UKFRS as like, we'll just call we'll just get another vehicle here. You've only got what you brought with you.
So it's all about rescuing the most number of people in the shortest amount of time. So we triage the work site. So that involves, in the broadest sense, walking up and down streets and through towns trying to find viable work sites. So that means a place where somebody might be in a sort of a survivable void. So that's what it's all about, identifying where these work sites are, sending that information back to our base, and then they will then send the appropriate teams or resources back to those work sites that have got the most chance of the most people being rescued in the shortest amount of time. And that's kind of how it works, but that does involve walking past people in need, so it is hard.
You said there about limited number of people, limited number of resources, so I just wanted to ask you about sort of personal welfare, personal admin. It's something you've been assessing and the team have been assessing whilst they're here.
Yeah.
Stopping people knowing their own limitations, stopping themselves from going too far, because like I say, when you're on a deployment, you can't continue to work to the detriment of yourself and your team.
Yeah.
So how do you assess that process with your recruits, and how have you seen it either going right or going wrong when people push themselves too far?
Yeah, so that experience you get from doing these kind of training exercises or through recruitment, if you're not looking after yourself from the get-go, from the very first second of deployment, exercise, training, whatever it is, the fatigue builds within you. So if you're not eating and drinking whenever you get the chance to, or sleeping or resting whenever you get the chance to, it's just kind of cumulative. So the recruits on the selection we've just been on, for example, if the teams are perhaps a bit stressed, they're sort of at a heightened state of the teams are turning up, they're desperate to do well, and they kind of forget really to eat, to drink, to rest. And
they're like, here's your next task.
Yeah,
and you specifically
just getting on
give them
with
the task and see if they're going to
absolutely
do their admin first. Are you going to take the chance to eat?
And what happens is they get given time to have a bit of a breakout. They'll get given 5 minutes to just get their personal admin together, and the good teams will perhaps one person in the team might get his rations out and share that amongst the other team, whilst the other team are maybe looking after feet or reading a map or whatever it is, sterilising some water from a stream, whatever that might be. But the good team's always making time for themselves and looking after themselves, whether that's powdering the feet, like I said, or sterilising water. But that translates across to deployment, because the experienced members of the team on deployment, for example, you'll turn up at the airport knowing that you're going to be there for 3 or 4 hours. They'll be on the floor in a sleeping bag, fast asleep. Whereas the newer members of the team are running high on adrenaline and absolutely raring to go. And they get that sort of early burnout if you're not careful. So that's when the experience comes in.
So if the recruits that have been on here are successful, we've been hearing from national coordinators and stuff, some of the stuff that's been planned for this next year, what have they got to look forward to, and how are UKFRS continuing to support internationally over the next year in terms of capacity building? What does that look like for the team, and what's happening in the next 12 months?
We've got hot weather deployments coming up. We've got no notice exercises coming up, again to test the deployment, to test both smaller teams, these sort of light teams that we're talking about, so fewer numbers. We've got light, medium and heavy teams in the USAR world, so testing more of our light capacity. We've got more recruitment coming up in the early part of next year too.
Wow.
And we've just been to Mozambique. Doing the flooding.
So fire services from all over the UK. How many fire services get involved in UK ISAR?
Okay, so UK ISAR currently has 15 fire services. It's split into sort of 2 distinct groups. There's 3 services that take on specialist functions. So you've got Hampshire does base of operations logistics, London do the rescue logistics, and West Midlands Fire and Rescue do the command and control elements. So what happens on a deployment, those 3 teams that specialise in those skill sets deploy on every deployment. The remaining 12 teams work a rota, so they'll be on call for 4 months, off call for 4 months, and the 6 fire services will deploy with those, like I say, those 3 specialist teams.
So there's some serious structure with it. If somebody is successful coming on the team, well, firstly, what sort of people can apply for it? What do you have to have a certain level of competency, or can anybody apply for it in terms of firefighters, or how does it work?
So, in terms of competencies and what we're looking for, like I said, a good egg. We're specifically looking to address the gender balance that we've got, or misbalance in the team, particularly when we deploy abroad. It can make a massive difference to how we can interact with the local population. Yeah, there is no real skill set involved. Like I said before, the fact that you're not a rope rescue expert really makes no odds. We're looking for the person with the drive and that compassion, the enthusiasm. We're looking for those values and behaviours specifically that make people want to help.
If they are lucky enough to get recruited, what sort of training do they get to look forward to? What's the standard USAR sort of training and skill sets that they end up picking up?
Okay, so we'd expect all ISAR technicians to be USAR trained, so the USAR 1 and 2 courses. Following that,
what does that entail for people that are unfamiliar with what USAR means?
Yeah, so USAR, Urban Search and Rescue, so a USAR 1 course, very much a tool handling course, so you learn how to operate coring drills and breaking and breaching equipment to smash through concrete. You'll learn how to operate acoustic and seismic search devices, cameras to look through holes, etc. You'll learn how to operate the various bits of lifting and moving equipment. And then moving on to the USAR 2 course, it's more about putting that equipment into practice in a more sort of systematic search approach. And
you also have some specialist hot cutters, and you do chainsaw courses, and because when you're doing your deployments, there might be a myriad of just trying to get to the location, and even where you've done your recruitment this year, there's been a series of fallen trees. If this were an operational incident, you'd be expecting people to be deploying, clearing routes for emergency vehicles. So all of that
That's
folds
right.
into it, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's more of your operational side of the team. So yeah, absolutely, the hot cutting, the chainsaws, as you say, and then whirring around in the background from a management point of view. You've got specialists, safety and security officers, people with additional media training. So there's an awful lot of additional training courses and additional. The benefits are just massive, basically, for being on the ISAR team. The benefits are just huge for services as well. So the services are sending personnel on these ISAR training courses, on these ISAR deployments, but the benefits they're getting back into service through the training, through the knowledge, the sharing of information and knowledge across services. Yeah, if you've got a problem that you need to solve in a service, you've got then friends and teammates in other services. It makes it very easy to solve problems.
Without naming any names, some of the most impressive things you've seen, Admiral characters, or what are some of the good things you've seen from the recruits during this year?
Yeah, we've seen some particularly impressive candidates this year that are thinking outside the box, having never been put in certain situations before. Some dynamic situations that have meant the candidates have had to think quite quickly, and some of the candidates have had some great sort of thinking to inform base of operations of what's going on, inform base of operations of coordinates where they're at. And again, these are kinds of things you'd expect people to be taught, not just off the top of the head. So we've had some really good common sense and competent decision making going on. It's been good.
Beautiful mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How did you find this year's recruitment?
The hardest thing I've ever done, but enjoyable, and learnt loads. Yeah, working in the water late at night, no visibility, snowing, that took me by surprise.
What advice would you have for any recruit that was about to come on selection?
Stay open-minded, stay positive, and work on your fitness.
Hard.
Hard. Have you ever done something like this before?
No.
What advice would you have for somebody coming on selection?
Be prepared for anything, I would say. The weather was horrendous. Yeah, it's just tough.
How long have you been a part of the UK Fire Service?
A long time. 21 years? 21 years.
21 years?
Yeah.
What made you want to come into UKFRS now?
I've been trying to do it for a few years, and it's just like the goal, isn't it? The ultimate goal to do the ISAR stuff for me, personally.
How did you find this year's recruitment?
Very tough, to be fair. I thought it potentially would be one of those fire brigade courses where we'd do a bit of this and that and then be a tick in a box. But it was graft, to be fair. It was graft.
How did you find the weather?
Shocking at times, especially last night. But
So for people that are unfamiliar, we're in the Lake District. You've pretty much had non-stop rain. I think you've maybe had 40 minutes plus sleep over the last couple of days.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Tough situation. How does that compare to usual working in the fire service?
Most of that is in bed. Yeah, you go from one extreme to another in a blink of an eye, and it puts you through it, to be fair. You've definitely got to have a proactive mindset and be prepared to graft.
How did you find this year's recruitment?
It's probably, as I said, probably the hardest thing I've done in my life.
Yeah?
Yeah, without a doubt.
How did you find it working with people from all sorts of different fire services where you're not used to having the same crew with you all the time?
I mean, at first when I saw my crewmates on different teams, I was a little bit dejected, but as soon as I started working with them, they're all great lads. We all come from different brigades, but essentially we do the same job. You need to obviously have patience and just work on people's strengths and weaknesses.
How did you find the weather and the lack of sleep?
Where do I start with the weather? The weather was diabolical. Yeah, we got to the top of the mountain, rain was horizontal. There were like little bullets hitting your face. There's no such thing as a good coat. There's no such thing as a good coat. And when you think it's all over, it's not.
Just find this year's selection?
Very hard.
Okay, what was the hardest thing about it?
The weather was the main thing, and if you've got any sort of niggling injuries, it's not a good idea to come and do this. You just got to be aware of your own limits, aware of other people's limits, those in your team and everything. Just make sure you work as a team and support each other.
I'm so ready to go to sleep.
We'll put that in as a soundbite.
Yeah. Sarah Mimner.
Sarah, how did you find this year's selection?
Challenging, but good.
Now, you've done a series of things in the past, adventure races and all sorts of other craziness. How did this compare to those sorts of challenges? What was different about it?
To be fair, adventure racing and sort of ultra distance marathons, they're a really good basis for this because the sleep deprivation and just the the sort of relentlessness that you have with these sort of challenges. But nothing will ever prepare you for this. You've just got to completely work on your personal fitness and your personal admin. I think what made this such an awesome experience was the team, because we had never even really met until this moment, yet we performed really, really well. We didn't even argue. We were just a constant boost of morale, and I think that for me, for my selection, was personally the game changer. I think with anyone that's doing it, even sort of male or female, it really pushes the limitations of your personal fitness and your mental resilience, whatever gender coming into it. If you've got those two squared away, you can go into this and you can work on your USAR and your ISAR knowledge. And I think that's kind of the package you're looking for. And as long as you're just a good team member and a positive person, and you can smile in the face of horizontal rain or snow, I think that's kind of where you're going for if you want to be successful.
Steve, how did you find this year's selection?
It was grueling.
Grueling?
Yeah.
What was most grueling about it?
There were a good set of structured challenges which broke up a grueling walk in hard weather.
There is a heck of a lot of walking involved in this sort of stuff. Do you get any sort of training in navigation and topography for this? Or
Personally, I've undergone a lot of training for navigating, orienteering, that kind of thing. But the task breakup meant that every 4K, 6Ks, you'd be challenged with something that you couldn't have foreseen, which will test you right on the edge of your awareness of health and safety and looking after your welfare and the welfare of the team. You can only really work off your skills there, and if you're starting to go down at all, any little weakness and the challenge will beat you. You have to hold to your core, really. Yeah, you're dealing with varied challenges in the fire service all the time. You can go from 0 to 60 and you're dealing with something immediate with a bit of kit you might have only just picked up and started to use with people perhaps that you haven't worked before. But this is taking that right to the edge. And for example, we've had trees, people are talking about the tree fall here this week. There's been trees that are 200 years old going over, and then you might be looking at a tree for a bit of an anchor that looks solid, and any normal day of the week you go, yeah, I'd have that. But in this weather you're thinking, I'm not sure I'd trust a tree, So yeah, it's very tough to put that risk assessment into a different scenario.
what advice would you give somebody coming on the selection?
Be aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. Keep your eye out for your team.
Will, how did you find this year's selection?
Yeah, really tough, but rewarding.
What did you think it was going to be like when you were coming up to it? Because obviously you've known about it for a few weeks probably, trying to ask people questions, trying to get an understanding for it. How did it compare to what you did?
Well, no one would divulge much. All they said was it was tough, and it really was tough. I think it was much tougher than I'd expected it to be, because I had nothing to base it on. And in my head it was going to be tough, but it was way beyond that. You're challenging your mind to do things when it's fatigued. Be open-minded to what's expected, because it's your own interpretation of it. Just got to work through it. Everybody's tired, everybody's fatigued. You've just got to find a way of getting through it together and achieving what you're there to achieve.
Jamie, how did you find this year's selection?
Really difficult.
Yeah,
it was tough.
How long have you been in the service?
3.5 years.
3.5 years?
Yeah.
What made you want to come and do UK ISAR? Some people think, you need to have done so many years, or you should wait your turn, or all this sort of craziness. I'm not a believer in that.
No.
It takes a lot of confidence to want to come and do this a few years into it. Why did you want to do it?
I want every ticket in the fire service, USAR, ISAR. I've always wanted to be a firefighter, and more chance of getting out there, doing jobs, see different things. I'm normally just I'll go in the gym and lift weights and stuff. I do other forms of training, but nothing in preparation for this. I didn't know what to expect.
What advice would you give to people dealing with it?
Make sure you've got the right clothing, and make sure you keep your clothes dry and get a dry bag. That's where I went wrong.
Hey folks, Pete here, just dropping back in to give you a little reminder that we are still running our HAIX competitions. We saw over 120 people apply for the last HAIX competition across so many different platforms, but we have also got another partnership now with Tallyman. So these are the unique personalised BA tallies that you see in all the breathing apparatus sets. You can win 2 of these personalised to yourself and sent to you without any cost. This is just another little giveaway from the podcast, and honestly it's my favourite bit to do. So thanks for coming back, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you again real soon back here on the Firefighters Podcast.